Today's show is brought to you by Audible, and right now you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/joined-up. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. Thanks for tuning in to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, a weekly show featuring interviews with fantastic authors sharing their personal stories on how and why they write. There's hints and tips for aspiring writers and great book reviews from top bloggers. Follow us on Twitter at JU Podcast. Right, cue the cheesy theme tune.
Put down your pen and stop your typing. Grab yourself a drink, 'cause it's Joined Up Writing.
Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly and it's episode 82 with screenwriter CJ Walley talking about how writing saved his life, or at least his mental well-being. He's also got loads to say about creative inspiration and its importance to a happy, healthy lifestyle, as well as some practical tips for budding scriptwriters out there. There'll also be time for another trip to Book Bloggers Corner with Bibliomaniac, aka Catherine Sunderland, reviewing A Patient Fury by Sarah Ward. Before we get to all that, I thought I'd fill you in on what's going on with me. You may or may not have noticed we've had a rare 2-week break from the podcast releases. I thought I'd actually treat myself and take some of the pressure off while I went on holiday to Spain. And that was a lovely break from the day job, but it's also, I should imagine, the most sustained editing I've done on the novel since I started it, so I managed to do a couple of hours most days, which was great. And in my last full intro, I mentioned I'd been sending the novel out, both in terms of on submission, but also to a few trusted readers, and that's what's been driving me on to push forward with the final edit of the novel. I mean, I say final edit, I'm well aware that if it does get picked up there'll be plenty of new edits to work on, but it's the final big edit I'm going to do before cracking on with a new project. And at this point I just want to say a huge thanks to M.W. Leeming, Catherine Sunderland, Victoria Goldman and Tony Schumacher, all of whom have agreed to take a look at the manuscript, and early feedback has been really encouraging, and Wayne Leeming in particular is really pushing me to keep my head down to send him the next instalment, which has been a massive boost, so thanks for that. I'm not sure it's the usual suggested way of doing it, sending out the manuscript in chunks like this, but as we've said on here many times before, there are no rules. Whatever gets you through the night is what I always say. The main thing is just keep going with whatever project you've got on the go, shake off the self-doubt and get it into the world. Without critique, we don't improve, and there's an incredibly supportive network of writers out there who will do their best to help you. Right, on to the show and a lovely chat with CJ Walley. Based in Newcastle-under-Lyme in the UK, CJ is a prolific writer of scripts and the creator of the excellent free online resource Script Revolution. Having had a number of short films and independent features produced, he's now signed his first writer-for-hire contract for a Hollywood-based production company. Exciting times and a really enjoyable conversation that has something for all writers and creatives. Okay, brilliant. Thanks for coming on, CJ. Really appreciate it. And yeah, it struck me as I was doing the research for this, I was looking at your website. I really liked your very honest backstory about how you sort of came to writing. So why don't we start there? Kind of what led you to want to write?
Oh, it's a very up and down story, this is. I'm pretty open about it. It was actually a mental breakdown got me into writing. And I guess it's probably not too unusual.
It's not. No.
Yeah, I am like the last person in the world you would have thought would end up writing as a job. I was the kid at school struggling English and everything like that. And I still do struggle because I've not had that much practice, quite frankly, over my lifetime.
Yeah.
And my career just didn't make me happy anymore. And I ended up throwing up a load of emotion, lying on the floor sobbing with the cat staring at me, wondering what was wrong with me. And at that point, when life was about as low as it can get, I ended up turning to the writing. Because my head was just full of all these ideas, and I didn't realise that not everyone has that. Like, for instance, my wife doesn't imagine fantasy worlds or anything like that. So I realised that was a real privilege. I was very lucky to have that. And I just poured myself into writing, which is probably the worst thing you can do if you're in that position, because you just go to crazy town.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we've had lots of people on, like as you say, it's not that unusual, and I've had lots of people on before, and they've used writing as a form of therapy. Mm-hmm. So how did you kind of go from that to thinking actually creative writing specifically something they do, and to maybe thinking, I could maybe, could restart my career doing something like this?
Yeah, I think I first started, I wanted to write scripts. That was my big thing, because a lot of what I was imagining was very visual, very film-esque, very cinematic. Mm-hmm. So I jumped straight into script writing, and I really, really went for it. I was 32 at the time, and I had never done anything like this, really. So it started off writing a script. That then became a novella. I then wrote another script. That became a novel. Then I wrote another script. And this was in the first year. This was in the first 12 months. Mm-hmm. And I was just writing all the time, writing at the weekend, thinking about writing, maladaptive dreaming. I was in another world a lot of the time. And when I knew it was a big deal to me, when I was prepared to just throw everything away to write, nothing else mattered anymore but writing.
And that's when you thought, right, this is where, almost like monk-esque, it's like kind of going into the hills and kind of starting from nothing again.
Yes, except without the robe, I guess. But it was that pivot. And I hear about this so often with creatives, is at some point in their life, they get kind of sick and tired of what they're doing. It's not making them happy. And they think, wow, this is such a left field thing to do. This is so bizarre. This isn't, why am I going here? Why am I writing music? Why am I playing the guitar? Mm-hmm. And then they look back to when they're kind of 5 years old or, early teens, and it fits. And they suddenly realize, maybe they were drawing, maybe they were listening to music, maybe they were dancing, maybe it was something related, but it was there. The fascination was always there.
So how did everybody else react? How did your loved ones react?
My mum was particularly pleased, because my mum entertained writing at a very similar age in her life. And, she was a mum and very busy, and it was harder back then. So I think, she was really pleased to see me pick that up. And generally, I'm surrounded with quite creative people. My background's in design, graphic design, web design. So a lot of my friends are creatives.
So it wasn't like, as you say, although it was kind of left field for you because it hadn't really occurred to you, it wasn't, it didn't come completely out of nowhere. You were kind of embedded in the visual arts, especially presumably if you're doing graphic design.
The thing about graphic design is it's more engineering than it is art, and that's one of the reasons why I was never fulfilled by it. Mm-hmm. It's also, if you kind of like scribbling cartoons at school, you're most likely to end up being pushed into graphic design as if it's the same thing, and it really isn't at all. It's blueprinting more than anything. Mm-hmm. So it was a strange little move, but I've always been a storyteller.
It's a little bit like, you're quite right about that with the, I can't draw, so it's never been really an issue for me. I would never have got pushed into it, but it was a little bit similar with writing, because if you said that you liked writing when you were at school, it was, okay, well, the only thing you can realistically look at doing is journalism. Mm. If you said to somebody, I want to write films, or I want to write a book, or whatever it is, it would be well, that's very hard to get into. So, this is the thing that you should do. I can tell you, this is in the book. I can tell you where this is and what sort of career path is for this. So it sounds similar in a way.
It's very much a case of lower your expectations.
Exactly.
Aim for the mainstream. Become a robot.
Exactly. Yeah. As I say, I kind of equate it to, especially when I was coming through careers advice, it was, they would consult this it was almost like a Yellow Pages. It was like, all right, let me look that up. Okay, writing. Yeah. All right, yeah, journalism. That's the thing that you could do, So you started out. So you said that the first 2 or 3 things you started out, although you started out thinking this is a script, I'm writing a script, they sort of became novellas or novels. Why do you think that was?
And desperation. That was as soon as I wrote a script and I kind of created a Twitter account and waited for Hollywood to come knocking on my door because, wow, this guy in England, in the middle of nowhere in England, has written a script. Everyone should be paying attention to that, right? I soon realised just how ludicrous it was as a concept to try and write a Hollywood movie, especially a reasonable, budget one. And then, as usual, as in that typical writer fashion, I started to think, well, how can I make this easier for myself? And of course, things like self-publishing novels and things like that really started to appeal to me. And these fingers were just eager to go, and I was just loving the detail of writing and obsessing with that. And the novel format allowed me, in effect, to overwrite. It was a bit of a sort of, perhaps an indulgence I shouldn't have been embracing.
Yeah, but as you say, probably one of the things, particularly people that aren't familiar with writing screenplays or they've never had a go with it, as you say, it's the economy of work. I mean, everything is really, really tight. I mean, it's obviously driven by action and dialogue, and it does take some getting used to if you come from that kind of background of writing longer form things. It is completely different, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's almost completely juxtaposed in some ways, and the attitude to it. If you can imagine, every time you handed a manuscript over to a potential agent or publisher, and the first thing they do was to flick through the pages to see how much white space there was, you'd be saying, well, that's so superficial. But in this world, it's I don't know if it's necessarily fair, but it is a measure of ability.
And for people that I know what you're talking about when you talk about that, but there'll be people listening to this that they've probably only looked at a script maybe once, if at all. So what do you mean when you say that? Why would they be checking to see how much white space there is there?
It's partly a superficial obsession, to be honest, because there's this. It's a bit of an axiom, really, that more white space is better. However, generally speaking, new writers overwrite, and therefore, when you look at a script, you can. Oh God, this sounds terrible, but you can kind of just tell by how it looks, how clean it looks, how many lines of paragraphs actually run into, how many orphans are sitting there, how many widows are involved, stuff like that. It all makes sense, and you get a feel for it.
I don't think it's that harsh. I think it's the same with novels to a certain extent. I should imagine if an editor or a prospective agent or publisher or whatever receives a manuscript, it's the same. I mean, if they look at the first page and it's literally just one great big long paragraph with no breaks, it's the same sort of thing. It's like alarm bells. It's like, what is this? I mean, obviously there are some exceptions to that do break those rules, and it'll be the same with script writing. But a lot of the time, it just screams that the person maybe doesn't know what they're doing, or at least a little bit about the form. So, how did you go about learning to? Because you had this, because it's quite a specific thing, like specifically to say, I want to write scripts. You started off like got this desire to write, but then it was particularly scripts that you started writing. So, when did you start kind of learning about that, like the mechanics of it, and how to go about doing that?
There's some great resources online, and in its basics, in terms of formatting, it is actually quite easy to learn, especially if you use script writing software. I mean, it's all laid out for you, and there's a bit of an obsession, really, with getting it perfect. But generally speaking, you can jump right in and start doing that. Where it's difficult to find good education on is writing scenes that actually work, writing scenes with production and budget in mind. For me, the thing that helped the most was listening to a podcast known as Script Notes, incredibly well-known podcast with John August and Craig Mazin. And, those early ones in particular, where they were just going over some of the more basic stuff, it was fascinating. I mean, it was things like, I think it was something that hit me like a ton of bricks, and it was Craig Mazin explaining that generally in a day's shooting, you can maybe do 2 scenes, and those scenes are probably going to be no longer than 2 to 3 minutes. So if you're writing scenes that are over 2 to 3 pages in length, that is a production conflict, and you've got to be aware of that. Now, I went one way and went the other, but that was just brilliant for me because I then went through all my stuff and changed that. And I think it was better for it. It was certainly more producible for it. So that was my first port of call. And I am a terrible academic indeed. I've got a real problem with listening to people unless they've had industry experience and have proven that. Thankfully, my attitude's changed to that over time, but there isn't a great deal of working successful writers who are actually going back into talking about the craft. It took me years to find the really good information and a ton of book reading, to be honest, and picking the bits I liked out of it. Generally speaking, the best stuff I've read, is stuff like Stephen King's book on writing, which has got nothing to do with script writing whatsoever, but it's all about story.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It was picking bits of that. It was reading about case studies. It was a little bit of looking at scripts, but more so reading about how these scripts ever got made in the first place.
It's interesting you say that about that. There's a kind of dearth of people that have actually made it and that are doing things that actually then go on to talk about it, because it's similar. My day job's in film and video production, and it's the same sort of thing. I mean, there are lots of courses. I mean, you can obviously go to university, which I didn't do. If you go to university and do these courses, but inevitably you find the people that are running them haven't actually worked in the industry, or if they haven't worked in the industry for a long period of time. Because if they were, they'd still be doing it, unless they've sort of passed it and they've decided to go back or whatever. But did you get a chance, presumably early on when you started writing these scripts? Did you at some point? I know you were writing shorts and things like that. Did you get to be involved directly in like a production of like a short film or anything like that?
Well, that was the game changer. And I know that you yourself have a lot of experience writing short stories. At the end of the day, the story itself from start to finish is the most important part of the craft to master. To understand why we tell stories, how that's important in our culture, and then also, within Western culture, and then within Western commercial culture, the standard framework, the hero's journey, stuff like that, and just to appreciate and understand that. And for me, sitting down and writing stories that could be no longer than 6 or 7 pages, where you're thinking, right, okay, someone's going to make this, and it's just going to be a camera guy, a sound guy, and a couple of friends acting in it. And that was just absolutely fantastic. I optioned scripts left, right, and centre. I probably optioned in the range of 25 over a couple of years. Hardly any of them got made, but I learned so much, and I'm so thankful for that. And I learned a great deal about the post-writing and the optioning and the pre-production side of things, and that was so enlightening.
Just from getting out there and doing it. As you say, it's a different thing, isn't it? It's kind of it's putting those limitations. Sometimes limitations are good, aren't they? Because they kind of, in a way, they kind of free up your imagination in different sorts of ways. They get you thinking in a different way, don't they?
I think so. I think it helps quash a lot of distraction. If you're writing a 6-page short that's going to be a shoestring budget, then you're not going to put a car chase in it. And it's nice to be able to just get that off the table and carry on with what you want to do. And the other thing about short scripts is, of course, the commercial freedom. The fact that you're not sitting there thinking, is someone going to make this? Is there something else out there like this? Is it appealing? Is it profitable? The only sort of side that does frustrate me is it's very festival orientated, and festival stuff, it's not really my bag.
No, I know what you're saying. It's a little bit like literary fiction.
Yeah.
It's for some people, including me. I mean, I am generalising because I do like some literary fiction, but yeah, it is a little bit like that. It's kind of it can be quite worthy and kind of as you say, we're going for awards here rather than necessarily entertaining somebody for 5 or 10 minutes. Absolutely. The talent needed to write a good, powerful short story. When I look at something that Pixar do, and I'm just blown away by the ability of that writing talent. It is not where I excel personally. So when you sit down to write a script, you're talking a lot about story and different bits and pieces there, and I know there's a famous quote, isn't it? Is it William Goldman or somebody, screenplays are structure. And how much do you kind of believe that that's true, and how do you approach it when you're sitting down to write something, say like a feature or whatever it happens to be?
I thought I'd never understand structure because it's spoken about like it's some kind of black art. So for quite a few years, I obsessively researched structure. Obsessively, I looked at Western culture, Eastern culture. I looked at a load of different structure systems, and in the process of doing that, I actually developed my own, which I call Turn and Burn, which I have on my own website, actually, on cjwalley.com. And for me, I go into that and it unleashes all these ideas, and it really helps me stay on the correct course. It's more of a compass bearing than anything else.
So if you could kind of sum that out, I know, as you say, I'd encourage people to go to your website anyway. It's a really good website, and there's lots of information on there. But if you could kind of sum up that Turn and Burn, what's kind of the principles behind it?
Turn and Burn is a 5-act structure system, and it just focuses around 5 easy to remember words, which is yearn, turn, burn, learn, and earn, which are the 5 components of what I think is a good story. This side of the world, certainly, and within commercial storytelling, absolutely.
So presumably the yearn is so the person, the protagonist or whatever, needs something. They have a desire. Is that the kind of thing that starts it off? Is it? It's
the concept that the protagonist is in a state of stasis. So they are comfortable but yearning for something more, like many of us are. And of course, stasis is death. And then turn is the new world that they go into. Burn is the point of no return, where there's no chance of getting back to their previous life. Learn is that dark despair that they go through, where they suddenly realise who they are, what their flaws are, and what's wrong with the world. And then earn is only what I call a point of acceptance. That is getting to a point where winning, losing, a bittersweet ending doesn't actually matter because they've learned something important about life, or accepted something important about life.
And they have to be different, don't they? They have to be different from where they started out in some way, shape or form.
They have to be aware of something about a life truth and a firm thing about life. And of course, that's not just the protagonist, that's the antagonist as well.
But do you think, like, the thing, as you say, a lot of people kind of view these things as it's like some kind of dark art, and this whole reams of non-fiction books that just talk about story and structure and everything else. But do you think, particularly in kind of, whichever culture you're from, whether it's Eastern or Western, we've kind of all got this kind of burnt in from, almost from the first time we can talk, the first time we hear stories and we see films and we experience these things. Do you think it's kind of something that's instinctive?
Absolutely. I mean, I use this principle. I call it the cheeseburger principle, and I say that as a vegetarian now. But it's basically the concept of a cheeseburger is something we can all pretty much understand. However, if we were all asked to describe a cheeseburger, we perhaps draw the lines in different places. And some people would say, well, it's a bun with a burger and some cheese on it. And some will say, well, no. It's a burger, it's sauce, it's onion, it's a bun, it's salad, it's cheese, it's more sauce, and it's a bun and it's sesame seeds. And basically, if there's one thing I've learned about structure, and it absolutely supports what you've just said, generally speaking, it's all the same. We're all talking about the same thing. We're just all analysing in different ways. And I wish people understood that more, because I feel that there's too much team sport attitude towards structure. People read Save the Cat, they decide, okay, 3 acts, Save the Cat system. Someone reads, I think it's Writing 101 by Hulk Critic. That promotes the 5-act structure. And in fact, I can tell if someone's read a particular book by what they will absolutely decide is the best way to do things. And they've only read one book. They're criticising everything else without even looking at it.
And don't you think that's the case with a lot of writing books, though, in general? Because there is, I mean, for me, like you mentioned, I think that's why On Writing is so popular, and it's such a great book. I mean, it's mentioned almost like every other week on this show. I'm the same. It's like my favourite writing book, and I think one of the reasons is because it's so. it's got such general themes in it. Rather than saying you should definitely do it like this, it talks in more general terms about, well, you know, this is the kind of things that you kind of want to. Well, the way that he interweaves his own story in it as well, obviously makes it entertaining. But there is a danger, especially when you first start out, as you say, whichever medium you write in, you read. You know, you'll read a book, the world changes. You think, oh my God, this. I mean, I read Save the Cat. I really enjoyed Save the Cat.
Yes, good book.
But I didn't. I completely take your point about you can read that book, and if you read it and you prescribe to it like it's a Bible or something. I mean, the thing that really turned me off, and it's not me at all, and I just couldn't even imagine doing it, is the kind of mathematical thing that it's got in it, where it's like, say, you know, you turn to page whatever it is, 78, and this will be, you know, this needs to be happening and all that kind of stuff. I'm not into that, and even if I started turning to if I'd written a script and I turned to that page and it was kind of pretty much right what he said, I'd still be annoyed by it. So I'd think, well, I didn't mean to do that. That's not, you know, maybe it's like, you know, on average, a lot of people, the turn happens there or whatever it is. I understand it. But the fact that it can be so prescriptive, and I don't actually think that Blake Snyder wanted it to be that prescriptive. I don't think that's probably what he had in mind. But obviously some people really do take it like that.
This is the danger. This is the danger.
Yeah, and if you follow it, they think, well, no. And they can't understand that this script still might be rubbish because, you know, there's not the motivations of the protagonist or the antagonist are way off, or the dialogue's terrible, or whatever it is, or there's baggy scenes, or, you know, there's scenes in there that don't need to be in there, or whatever it is. But, you know, no, this happened on this page, and I've got that bit that he said there that needs to happen in this area, and I can't understand why it's not a good script. So, but I definitely think that opens out to lots of books about writing. As you say, people think they've stumbled on. No, you're right. Yeah, self-help books and stuff as well.
It's self-help. I've been fortunate to work in a lot of different industries, and the most dangerous thing an influencer can do is say, right, here's some rules. Here's how you do something. And I've seen it before where people they'll come back from a seminar on Twitter, you know, because they're in marketing, and they say, you can't write a tweet longer than 25 words or it won't work. and they now believe that whatever they do is going to go viral because they now have this information. It's the same with photography. People will say, this is how you sharpen one scene and then a different type of scene with no regards to resolution, all kinds of different things. Blake Snyder's Save the Cat book, which I do think is a good book, it's got some great stuff in there. One page is about the beat sheet, one single page. Everything else is very general, log lines. I love the bit about the Pope in the pool, about having something going on in a scene in the background. But he's got this one page, and this is the mistake, because I think people who haven't embraced an artistic mindset see that and they go, brilliant, rules, this is what I need, this is and then they think by hitting those notes that they've hit this unlock code. And then it goes off to Hollywood. And the thing is, is the famous quote, in Hollywood, nobody knows anything. There are producers who are going through scripts and they are measuring against Save the Cat. I've heard, anecdotal stories about this. So it actually can work.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, I checked on the beat sheet and he has got that bit that's happened. Yeah, definitely. I think the most important thing, surely, is know your audience. Whatever it is whatever genre that you're writing in. As you say, you write a lot of genre stuff, and for that, you really need to know your audience. You need to know the tropes. You need to know the things that your audience is looking for.
Absolutely, and you know what? You've got to know your voice. This is it, and it's a horrible word to use because no one really knows what it means. But really, finding your voice is knowing how you need to speak to the people that really matter to you. And once you find your voice, it compensates for a whole lot of inadequate learning in other areas. And I think there's so much proof of that. There's a lot of existing movies out there which are cult classics, and when you go back and you look at them, they're structurally they don't age well. Some of them, I've gone back to movies that I used to love, and I just think, oh my god, this is terrible now. It drags here, it's not very punchy there, it doesn't really do anything. But at the time, it was saying something no one else was saying, and that's really important to a lot of people.
Absolutely. And how do you develop that, do you think? So I know it sounds like a strange question to ask, but how Do you feel as you've gone on, you've developed more of a voice, and how do you think you went about doing that? Is it just doing the work?
It's right there in front of you, and that's the frustrating thing. And for, I think, most people, it's in their earliest writing, which is difficult if you've been writing for 20, 30, maybe 50 years. It's very difficult to go back to what really appealed to you then. For me, it was fascinating to eventually come full circle. I wrote all these short stories, and I think what a lot of people suffer from is doubt and criticism. Mm-hmm. They write something, they're desperate for just somebody to look at it. Chances are the person most likely to look at it statistically is the last person you want looking at it, sadly. Mm-hmm. And they get judged on taste. And they get told that's not going to sell because it's risky. That's not going to sell because it's not mainstream. Mm-hmm. So people start dancing to the tune they think everyone wants to hear. Mm-hmm. And I lost maybe 3 or 4 years of my development in this kind of lost world. And the big thing for me was when people started reading my short scripts and going, oh my God, I love this. Mm-hmm. It's got attitude, it's got punch, it's, like you say, very genre, very unusual. But you know what? I like being in a weird little place because weird little places is where interesting stuff actually comes from.
It is, and I think nowadays, I had a long conversation with a colleague about this recently. The internet is, it's the land of the niche. But where a niche used to be, if you were in a niche and it was in your hometown or something, it might be like 50 people. A niche now could be 5 million people or whatever it happens to be, because there really is something out there for everybody, and there is an audience for these things, and there's definitely an audience for original storytelling, and maybe, as you say, a different voice or a different way of telling a story that we might have seen before.
Yes, absolutely. And, contemporary thinking, but the philosophy of life, it goes back so far, and there's so many people that have got so many interesting slants on that. On the topic of internet niches, I've read some great stuff out there, and we don't believe something's popular until it appears on the daily news. Okay. It's things like, 50 Shades of Grey, we thought that was an overnight sensation. And, E.L. James had 3 million followers on a fan fiction site for years. But 3 million followers on a fan fiction site means nothing to, your average Good Morning TV show. No. So everything appears to suddenly come out of nowhere when it breaks beyond that internet barrier.
Absolutely, yeah. You've got to start somewhere, and you've got to start building your audience. And I think just in general, you're better off being true to yourself from the get-go, because I think your work tends to be better because you're more passionate about it, you believe in it, and the end product tends to just be better, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think there's this trope a lot of people, go through, and it's this concept of they finally give up, they don't care anymore, and then they just can't stop writing. So they sit down, and then in no time at all, they write the best thing they've ever written. And it's because they don't care if anyone likes it. It's what they want to see. It could be a new audience. It could be a whole new concept. I don't believe right now that the current theatre audience or the current movie audience is going to say the same. I think there's going to be big changes. I hope there are, because I want to see those changes as a viewer.
Absolutely. So what for people that don't know, so tell us what does float your boat, and what sorts of things would you like to see?
My frustration is right now I don't want to go to the cinema because everything in the cinema is a huge blockbuster that's aimed at young kids that want to go on a roller coaster ride, and good for them, they can fill their boots. That's cool. I understand why that is. They're the only movies that actually make any money these days. We've got this huge gap. However, this is what drives me crazy. Where I think the future is I am going on all the streaming services, and I want 90 minutes of entertainment, but I want quirky, intelligent entertainment. And that sounds incredibly pretentious and arrogant, but
no,
I also think it's a little bit deeper, a little bit silly. And the thing is, I love Fargo. I love Billions. I love and I love stuff that's weird and quirky. However, I don't necessarily want to sit down and commit to 13 episodes of that, or get to the end of a season and then think, well, okay, here goes another season. So what I love is where I find a 90-minute movie. Maybe something like The Green Room, something that's really light and easy. And I sit down and I just have fun for 90 minutes. And it's not fast cut, and it's not superficial, and it's not obsessed with money and glory, and it uses actors I've never seen before. And I love that. Films like Seven Psychopaths, films like that, I sit down and I just go, oh, this is fun. And what I'm finding, and this is my dirty secret. I am addicted to Tubi. And do you know what Tubi is?
No, I don't.
It's a streaming service that's free. It's 100% free. It has some advertising in it, and I'm not sure if it's available in Europe right now. I think it had to be taken off with the new European changes on privacy, but it will come back. And it is full of old cult 1970s movies, some of them which are, are infamous, but a lot of them are just great old movies.
Sounds right up my street.
Oh, man. And you watch this stuff, and it was the auteur revolution, but a lot of these directors at the time, they didn't have the huge budgets or the ability to get that national exposure that those famous auteur directors got in Hollywood, so they're some of them are a little bit unknown, but they're absolutely brilliant. A film like A Boy and His Dog, a great little film that inspired the Fallout games. Psychomania, a fantastic old sort of late 60s, early 70s movie, which is supernatural but revolves around the Tun-Up Boy scene on motorbikes. It's just, there's some great stuff on there, and I love that. That inspires me. I always look for the love in these movies that people think it's funny to point and laugh at.
And that's Tubi, did you say?
Tubi, Tubi, yeah. Hopefully it's available again. But that's what I want to see. I want to see that culture. I want to be part of moving that culture. I want to go onto Netflix and actually look through the features section, because I'm not doing that. I'm just going through TV series. There's nothing there.
No, I know what you mean.
Westfield's a great TV series, but I don't. Well, it's not on Netflix, on Now TV. But I don't want to sit. I don't want to commit 13 hours of my life to that.
Right, let's take a quick break there for this week's Book Bloggers Corner. And this week, Catherine Sunderland, aka Bibliomaniac, brings us her review of A Patient Fury by Sarah Ward.
This is the BBC Book Bloggers Corner.
A Patient Fury by Sarah Ward. This is the third novel in the DC Connie Child series, and although I heartily recommend you go back and read the previous two books, this actually works perfectly well as a standalone, and in my opinion it's the strongest novel from Sarah Ward so far. A Patient Fury throws Connie and the reader straight into a terrible crime scene of a fire-wrecked property on Cross Farm Land, in which three people, a man and a woman and their child, are found dead. Immediately it becomes clear to the police that this is not an accidental fire, and the evidence quickly points to murder. The main suspect is the dead mother. Connie is determined to discover the truth behind what has happened and will not accept the swift explanations accepted by the other members of the force dealing with the case. She delves deeper into the story behind the family and discovers there is a fourth body from the past that has never been found, but might hold the answers to what actually happened at Cross Farm Lane. Connie Childs is a great protagonist. She has the perfect balance of all the ingredients we admire in a lead character and is definitely likeable and engaging. Readers will align themselves with her quickly and with loyalty. I really liked the way Connie interacted with the other characters, from her superiors to her team members to those who were victims or suspects. The relationship Connie forms with this cast of characters is really interesting and adds more depth not only to the plot but to her character as well. Ward's writing is very polished, fluent and natural. Her dialogue is well paced, pertinent, and it drives the plot forward effectively. I found Ward's use of imagery very haunting. The crime scene itself is very vividly depicted. She also manages to ensure that this one image of the main victim at the crime scene is not only a silhouette against a burning house as the bystanders look on, but also a silhouette which lingers over the pages of the novel. It reminds us what clues to look out for and what details to collect as we hear more from each character. A Patient Fury is very well paced and well structured. The fourth body introduces an unsolved mystery from the past, and it was intriguing to watch how the two stories, one from the past and one from the present, might link up. The last third of the novel is incredibly well executed, full of exciting revelations and twists, as the links between the characters are exposed and the loose ends tied up in a dramatic ending which still has enough surprises, even when the most clever of readers who think they might have solved the crime before Connie. Ward has a terrific understanding of the crime fiction genre, and A Patient Fury is a polished and accomplished page-turning thriller. I thoroughly enjoyed it and would highly recommend you seek it out and treat yourself to a copy. You will not be disappointed.
Book Bloggers Corner.
There you go, A Patient Fury by Sarah Ward, and you can find a link to that in the show notes, along with a link to Catherine's blog that's packed full of great book reviews and recommendations. Okay, let's get back to my chat with CJ Walley, where I asked CJ a little bit more about his actual process. So if you were sitting down tomorrow, maybe you are sitting down tomorrow, to write a new screenplay from scratch, have you kind of got a process now? Have you got a consistent way of doing things? How do you approach it? Do you sit down and plan the thing from start to finish? Do you just start with a scene that you've got in mind?
I do have a structure. I embrace the indulgence. That's always my philosophy. If tomorrow morning I get up and I want to write a 20-page scene, which is, I don't know, someone talking to a plant, I will do that. If that's what I'm excited and motivated about, I will do that. I will get all that energy out of me, because there's some brilliant stuff quite often in that. I'll speak in the voices. But I do have a sort of a motivation system that I go through that just keeps me pointed in the right directions. That's part of that whole turn and burn process which I've created. Really sort of asks me the questions that make me focus in new areas and get excited about those. And I find that very often it's impossible not to think of an exciting movie I want to write.
That's good. I like that idea of, as you say, just thinking, well, I've got this idea for this scene or this character, and I'm just going to write the hell out of it just for fun. I think sometimes, or too many times, when you're writing prose, you think, well, no, I've got to stick to this because I'm writing this chapter or whatever, or I'm trying to write a book, or you edit it before as you're writing it, which is the worst thing that you can do when you put breaks on it. But
terrible. I'm a big fan of pre-writing. That's what it all comes down to for me. Pre-writing gives me guidance, puts me in the direction I need to focus all my energy in. But here's the thing, indulgence is where the fun stuff is, and there is no correlation between being, a slave driver to yourself and output. There's no correlation. We're totally brainwashed into this idea that the harder we work, the better the result. It's not there. It's how much we enjoy it, the better the result.
Absolutely, completely agree. Well, that's kind of a good place to kind of wrap things up. So, just in terms of, I know you can't talk about everything that you're doing for various reasons at the minute, but can you give us kind of a hint of kind of what's up next or what you're working on at the moment?
It's all suddenly gone really exciting for me. It's all like the previous 6 years have just suddenly paid off. I signed my first writer for hire contract a couple of weeks ago for a production company over based in Beverly Hills, and I'm writing a feature script. I just can't believe that, and it's a super fun, quirky thriller script, which is also highly commercial, and we're already speaking to the distributor to make sure that it stays on track.
That's fantastic. So was that something that you, and again, I know you can't go into too much detail, but was that something that you pitched, or was it, as you say, was it more like a writer for hire in terms of they'd seen your other stuff and they said, we want you to write this?
It was crazy. They spotted a script of mine on a website called simplyscripts.com, which is a brilliant website run by Don Booth, completely free. I uploaded it there years ago. It's the second script I've ever written. And they loved it. And they were going to retire. And it's brought them back out of retirement. They ran straight to their distributor with it. The distributor said, absolutely not. That's not going to sell because it's what they would call a dirt movie. And the guy said, okay, what if it was set in the Shining Sea? What if it was set in LA? And he wanted me to rewrite it, and I said, absolutely not. I'll write you a new script, my friend. Let's go for it. And he had a ton of ideas, and we just it's so exciting. We sit, we get on Skype, and it's just like being 8 years old again, and getting the toys out and inventing new worlds, and I just love it to bits.
That's brilliant. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And where can people find more about you and your work online?
cjwalley.com. I'm that conceited that I have my own website and domain name, but it's all on there, and I am everywhere else. I'm all over everything: Twitter, Medium, Facebook, a lot.
I can find. I'll put stuff in the show notes anyway, so people can find you. So that's great. Well, for the time being, I know you're going to hang around for the epilogue, but for the time being, CJ, thanks a million. That was great.
Thank you very much, dude. Really loved it.
Okay, thanks again to CJ, and I highly recommend you check out his website, cjwalley.com, and the excellent Script Revolution, and I'll put all of those links in the show notes over at joinedupwriting.co.uk. That wraps things up for another week, but don't forget you can find the entire back catalogue of interviews on the website, and make sure you subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, or wherever else you get your podcast to have the show downloaded automatically every week. Also remember, you can get in touch with all your writing news, views, questions or comments, and tweet me with where you're listening or why you enjoy the show, and I'll give you a mention in a future show. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing and reading, and I'll see you next time.